Testing, 1 2 3. Hello, hello, hello. Testing, 1 2 3 1 2 3. Testing, 1 2 3 1 2 3. All right. It was working right before I recorded it. What the fuck? It was literally what the hell? Fuck. Now I'm a little worried. Shit. I hope audio is working for that video I just sent. It was literally I tested everything. Fuck. All right, hold on. Let me try playing this. Let me load this. Oh, he's gonna be mad at me. Fuck. This is not good. This is very not good. All right. Well, I might have to stream a little bit faster to get this shit taken care of. All right, we'll see. All right. What were we talking about? Okay, so to begin with, let me just catch up on supers real quick. Do you guys like this chapter? This chapter is phenomenal. Justin Holland, thanks for the 5. Hey, Morge, do you like training motivations? Bam. Sadistic choice between Crying Child and Sacred History. How do you like them motivations? I do like training motivations a lot. I just like what Oda's doing a lot here in that he is forcing a lot of turmoil for the Strats, like dramatic turmoil for the Strats and the Giants of Elbaf. I like that being the impetus for forcing characters to train. I like bringing characters to a low point before they're forced to get back up and get stronger. I think that's really, really good. Definitely like that. Gobble D Snuts, thanks for bringing the Pirate King to your member for 7 months. Seems like Somers was at God Valley. Do you think Gaban/Emeth used Conqueror's Haki to permadamage Immortals? I know you're loving the Tatum slander after that all-time collapse. All right, so Somers being at God Valley, yeah, it does sound like Somers was at God Valley. I don't know if Somers was at God Valley for sure, though, just because you can recognize Scopper Gaban without necessarily having been at God Valley, right? Like, let's read exactly what it was. Let's read it real quick, okay? Because fuck, what exactly did he say? Tax him. No, he says long time no see. Yeah, I guess you would assume that it's he met him at God Valley. I guess you would assume Scopper Gabad. I wonder if Gabad fucked him up at God Valley too. That'd be really funny. And that Tatum collapse. Even I didn't expect something like that. I watched the very end of game 2. Even I did, and I turned it on right as Tatum ran in for a dunk. And I was like, okay, he's actually going to close it out. But then the very next possession, he didn't. He just did that shitty-ass, turnover. Even I didn't expect him collapsing that hard. Because that's kind of like... I don't think he's that bad. At this point, it's basically clear why Tatum was... when Tatum was benched for the Olympics, I felt like the simple argument is, he doesn't shoot well lots of times, and he can be really unclutch in lots of really important games, right? And Olympics, they're all high-stakes games because it's single elimination tournament. Therefore, benching Tatum did somewhat make sense. But then over the course of the regular season, he put up good stats and everything, so it's like, okay, maybe he's taken a step forward, and then this just basically proved why he should have been benched at the Olympics, because it's like, even if he's taken steps forward, it seems like he still cannot be relied on consistently in these type of high-leverage scenarios. But I don't want to talk too much NBA here. Morge sold me Fent, thanks for the 5. What do you think about the apparent lack of interest a large portion of the fan base has for Elbaf? Supposedly people are not enjoying it all that much. I could definitely imagine that. Let's get the stream lights up to 50 real quick. I could definitely imagine that. I think I've seen little bits and pieces of people saying they're not happy with Elbaf. But the simple reason is Elbaf doesn't have a lot of hype stuff going on right now. I remember during Wano, there was a large section of Act 2 that people were not enjoying. A large section of Act 2 that people were just like, nothing is happening, we don't really care for any of these things, yada yada. It was once we got to Onigashima that most people started to, then things started to shift and people started really resonating with a lot of things that are happening, okay? But in Act 2, it was the same thing. It was a lot of, like, I don't know if you guys remember being weekly in Wano, but Act 2 in Wano was heavily, turning people off in a lot of different ways, okay? This was a period of time where I was still very optimistic about Wano, so funnily enough, so I'm just checking the lights. Funnily enough, during that period of time, I think in my Wano, I did a Wano Act 1, Act 2 analysis partway through the arc, if you guys remember. So I've technically done one Wano analysis already. And in that, I have to actually, like, defend some of what was going on in Act 2 because a lot of people were being very critical of Act 2. And I was just like, no, like, this is just I had to give a lot of reasoning for why it wasn't, we should rock with it or whatever. So that was in Wano. Then in Egghead was an arc that the big difference was there were some exciting things already taking place with Egghead, but those things were outside events. So Law versus Blackbeard was taking place. And then Kid versus Shanks was being set up. So, like, every few chapters we're getting something that was kind of tantalizing. What's happening right now with Elbaf is it's two things. We've gotten pretty far into the arc without any sort of exciting matchup for Luffy, Zoro, Sanji or anything like that, right? So we had Legoland, nothing exciting really there. And then, I'll just tell you right now, okay? From my time being a content creator, the things that really, really get people excited and say that an arc is good is three things. Really significant / hype fights, okay? And those can be either for the Straw Hats or outside characters, okay? That's number one, any sort of hype fights or matchups, okay? Number two, big story reveals or kind of big plot twist moments. So, for example, if you look at during Sabo's scenes with the Reverie, there weren't any big fights, but we were getting, like, reveals about Imu's past, Cobra dying, the Gorosei all having Zoan form, stuff like that. That's exciting. Or, like, the chapter Lulusia Kingdom was blown up. Like, big plot events or big plot twists, plot reveals, okay? That's number two. Number three, and this is the hardest one, people do really like when there are extremely well done character moments, okay? However, those moments have to be really, really, really good character moments. So, everyone talks up the Kuma backstory a lot. People love the Kuma backstory. However, I will say this, as a content creator, I know how viewership works. Even though everyone in retrospect really loves Kuma's backstory, there were only a few chapters of Kuma's backstory that actually were very, very, very popular, that people were tuning in, wanting to watch the streams, reviews, etc. Those were the Rocks chapter, and the Rocks chapter actually really falls into the second category of things I talked about, big story reveals, plot stuff, like hype character stuff, right? And then the Ginny's death chapter and Kuma's final moments chapter, okay? Those were the two chapters that were really character-based. Like, out of Kuma's entire backstory, the only two chapters that were pretty much exclusively character, that did really good in terms of viewer popularity, that were character-focused, were the Ginny death, which was a phenomenal character writing chapter, and Kuma's own montage chapter. That was obviously, people loved that chapter, right? But overall, Kuma's backstory, even though readers in retrospect really, really loved it, I mean, in real time, readers loved it, it wasn't as exciting as, like, a lot of the things that were happening previously, okay? So those are the three things that generally get One Piece fans really, really hyped up, okay? Big fights, big plot twists, like plot reveals or plot moments / lore reveals, okay? You can throw character introductions into that, okay? And then finally, really, really strong character moments. But they have to be really, really strong, okay? Oda's obviously capable of doing that, but they have to be really strong, okay? What doesn't get readers as hyped in general is what we've got going on right now with Elbaf, which is actually very good storytelling and very important for a long-term setup and telling a strong narrative arc, but it's not going to feel as exciting to readers in the moment, okay? What we're doing right now in Elbaf is, what we've lacked so far in Elbaf is, if you look at the Elbaf chapters that have hyped people up, they fall into generally category number 2, okay? Loki's introduction chapter was very, very hype because it's a big character reveal, right? It's something very exciting for the plot going forward, right? Then the big mural reveal, that's very exciting for the plot going forward. Shamrock's reveal, very exciting for the plot going forward, right? We've had those chapters in Elbaf. What we've lacked is any sort of significant fights. We had, one Luffy versus Gabon chapter, and that was about a half chapter, and it was a very brief skirmish. Even Luffy versus Lucci, at least that took up like 2 chapters, right? So if you're comparing to like previous arcs, like at this point in Egghead, we had Law versus Blackbeard already happen, we had Luffy versus Lucci happen, and I think we're setting up the Seraphim versus Luffy Zoro, etc. Okay, with Elbaf right now, the big difference is this seems to be an arc where, at least right now, Oda's not giving us much for Luffy, Zoro, Sanji action. Instead, he's wanting to focus on the weaker Straw Hats. Weaker Straw Hats getting fights does not fall into that first category of extremely exciting fights. It just doesn't. Readers are just not as pumped up to see a Brook, Jinbei fight scene or whatever. Even Robin, which I think she had a really cool scene this chapter, people are just not as pumped up, okay? So far, if you're looking at the categories, right? The categories of things that make most readers feel that an arc is very exciting. Have we gotten some really big fights yet? No, I'd argue that we're kind of getting that, but for not the Straw Hats that people want the fights for as much, right? If we were right now in the middle of Luffy versus Loki or like Zoro versus Loki, people would be calling Elbaf like an amazing start to an arc, but we're not, right? We're in the middle of like the mid Straw Hats, lower level Straw Hats getting their asses handed to them, okay? So that's one. Then 2, we have had some big lore reveals and plot moment reveals, but they've been few and far between and they haven't led to anything afterwards. So for example, Loki's introduction, really, really hype, but has Loki done anything since then? No, that's stuff for later, right? The mural, really, really hype, any sort of follow-up? No, so that's a one-off, one-panel sort of thing. That stuff is being saved for later. Shamrock, really, really hype reveal. Is he still around? No, he's been shipped off back to Marijua, right? So the exciting stuff right now is the Gods Knights versus like mid-level Straw Hats, basically. That is, in my opinion, really great stuff. I think everything that's happening right now is really great stuff if you are not obsessed with like only hype moments. If you want Oda to actually slow down, tell a story with build-up, dramatic low points, setups for characters, etc., this is good. This is what I would have wanted in like past arcs like Egghead, right? Egghead, a lot of the early stuff was actually like the most exciting stuff was just cutting away to other shit that's happening because the stuff that was happening in Egghead itself was fucking piss boring, right? Like, oh, we're gonna go play Scooby-Doo to find which one of the 6 Vegapunk bodies who we don't give a shit about any one of them individually, which one's the murderer or something. Like, Egghead didn't have any sort of significant character writing shit going on for any of the Straw Hats back then, but Oda was able to throw in sort of flashing lights type stuff more frequently in Egghead, okay? Elbaf doesn't have that yet. I hope that Oda continues this trajectory of just focusing on actually telling a dramatic storyline for the island itself. We are getting all the seeds for really good shit down the line. Loki's shaping up to be a very exciting character. His storyline seems to be like it's going to be really good down the line. It seems like the Gods Knights, when they return, they're going to be a very formidable force. It seems like there's a new type of Haki that needs to be learned here. It seems like we're going to get a lot of good character writing for a lot of the Straw Hats that need good character writing. Robin, Frankie, most likely Usopp, maybe some of the other, like maybe fucking Brook, right? This is all really, really, really good shit, but it doesn't fall into the big 3 categories that are going to get readers really, really excited about a chapter. Remember, when I say like category number 3 is really good character moments, I'm talking like really good character moments are what get readers really excited. Like again, the Kuma shit, right? Kuma's Ginny chapter and Kuma's final chapter of his backstory, those were both very, very popular scenes that made people love the backstory overall. But I'm saying like right now, it generally needs to be some really peak stuff that we're probably not going to get till the end of Elbaf character writing wise. Like just a standard chapter that is good character setup for Robin or something, that's not really going to have as much impact. On the flip side, a lot of people loved Robin and Saul's reunion chapter, if you guys remember. That was like a very popular chapter because, for better or worse, a lot of people seem to think that was some peak One Piece writing chapter. It of course wasn't, but that's one of the three. It falls into one of the three categories of things that people get really, really excited about when it comes to like considering a One Piece arc to be good early on. The funny thing is like, I feel like pre-time skip it didn't need to be like that. A lot of the time people were down to just let an arc play out. Like if you look at Alabasta, it opened with some really hype shit with Ace, but then after that we're in the fucking desert, you know, for a while, and we're fucking meeting Kung Fu Dugongs, and then Toto, and we're getting some setup for like what the backstory for Koza, Vivi's rebellion, and stuff like that. We're getting introduced to villains, but no big fights or anything like that. That was good. That was just considered good storytelling. But like nowadays in One Piece, it's just like it feels like if there's not flashing lights being thrown at us all the time, people just don't consider an arc to be as good. I think a lot of the early stages of Whole Cake, people did not consider to be as good. I remember like the whole Seducing Woods section. Like even if you think the Seducing Woods wasn't that interesting, people wanted more action out of what was going on in Whole Cake, and a lot of people were impatient and wanting to just get us to Wano at that point in time. I think Whole Cake really picked up for a lot of readers once we had that midpoint between the Luffy and Sanji fight scene, and then Sanji's the reveal with Pudding and everything. That's when people really, really turned with Okay, anyway, that's when people really, really turned with Whole Cake and started to really like it. And people loved Whole Cake actually for that whole section from the Sanji midpoint through the tea party. Where people largely fell off Whole Cake was once the climax turned out to be a lot longer than expected, with Big Mom just chasing them. Anyway, that's my thoughts basically on like why some people may not be liking Elbaf as quite as much as some other arcs right now. But I think that Elbaf, the way Oda is doing it, is set up that by the end of it, we will be hitting on all three cylinders really well. I think setting it up like this right now means that by the end of the arc, we will be getting our big fights that we want. I think we will be getting the big reveals, right? Like we will get elaboration on what the mural is, elaboration on probably Emu. Like we will be getting the big plot reveals and plot moments. And it sounds like the final war might begin by the end of Elbaf, right? And then with Oda doing the groundwork that he's doing right now, by the end of Elbaf, we should be set up for some great Straw Hat character moments. So this is just good storytelling. I like what Oda's doing here, even if a lot of people aren't getting the flashing lights that they want just yet. I don't think that has any bearing on how Elbaf is as an arc just so far. I think this is one of the first arcs. I think this is the first arc since Whole Cake that Oda is really, really setting up a traditionally really good One Piece story that's Straw Hat centric. Continuing on. Oh, Gobble D's Nuts, I think I missed this part of your message. Do you think Gaban/Emeth use Conqueror's Haki to permanently damage the Immortals? I think that there is... Okay, so this is going to be frustrating to hear. There is a specific ability that... there's a specific ability... you just got to wait for Tuesday's video. It's not just Conqueror's Haki. It might involve Conqueror's Haki or not, but there's a full other aspect of Haki that has been hinted at for some time. I'm not saying like a fourth branch or anything, but it's a Haki-based technique that has been hinted at for some time that's related to how things went down with the Gorosei back at the end of Egghead. But it requires a full video breakdown. Like, what Gaban just showed us, I think people are getting too caught up in, like, is it Conqueror's Haki, Advanced Conqueror's Haki, Ryo, etc. It is actually something that doesn't have to be either of those things. That sounds kind of weird to explain, but it is more of a technique than a level of Haki, if that makes sense. And it's something that we've already seen, hinted at multiple times in the story. It's something that we've been getting in the story for a little bit now. It's just been unexplained each time. It actually goes back to the Haki knot, for example. That's a thing that now makes sense with what Gaban just did. So watch out for next Tuesday's video, because what Gaban did, I think, is actually fairly clear. It actually just puts into place everything that we've been seeing Haki-wise that's been unexplained in the New World so far. Continuing on. Zetatic, thanks for the 20. Thanks a lot, man. This chapter brought me back from my reading hiatus. Finally, another Robin feat. Let's go Robin Chuan. Looks like Luffy needs to unlock better Haki. Also, this is Polmao, in case you were worried someone hacked into becoming a mod. Oh, that's Polmao. Hey, Polmao. Thanks for the support. Glad to see you back. Great chapter for you to return on. I do think that this is a clear setup for improving Haki, and I think it's actually something that's very relevant for not just Luffy. It's going to be very relevant for Zoro if you watch for Tuesday's video. And I imagine it'll be important for Sanji too if Sanji's set to fight God's Knights or Gorosei. But yeah, I'm happy about Robin scenes as well. And it was a cool way that Robin... I really like when Robin uses her powers to their full extent creatively because her ability is so fucking broken. Sabian Rob, thanks for the 5. Rania will fall, causing the monster trio to catch her and join the fight in the Sun Realm. Streams are goated, brother. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. I'm happy you enjoy the streams, of course. If that brings the monster trio out to catch her, that'd be really cool. The one thing I'd say is that, like, distance is a thing that matters. I think, from my understanding, Elbaf is really, 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 really fucking huge. Really, there's a reason they've needed ships to get around. I think it can be underestimated almost because it looks like one giant tree. But I wouldn't be surprised if Elbaf's width is similar to something like Alabasta. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a lot bigger than Egghead, for example, right? In Egghead, we saw that someone as fast as Venus Juro was able to cross the span of the island, pretty much immediately. Kizaru also. I feel like Elbaf is larger than that, though. I feel like Elbaf is more, country-sized. I don't know, just because... You might be right. This might be what gets the monster trio into it. But I don't know if just because Rania falls from, point A to point B, that she's going to be even in the proximity that the monster trio would hear her voice with observation Haki, let alone be able to cross over to get there. To be fair, we don't know where exactly they are in the underworld. No, they're right. No, in the underworld, they are at the center of the Elbaf tree, right? The Atom tree. So I feel like they're pretty far off. I don't know. Let's wait and see. You might be right. Joseph eBay, thanks for bringing a Yonko to your member for 10 months. Morch, how about the story parallels this chapter? Rayleigh and Sabaody to Kizaru, here both fight main villain. Rayleigh and Sabaody to Gabon, here both fight main villains. Luffy can't defeat and must learn new skill. Yes, this is a very, very clear parallel to the Rayleigh-Kizaru situation. That's something I talk about in this coming Tuesday video. That's a very deliberate decision by Oda, it seems like. Very, very excited to break down. That parallel, it actually connects more things than you might think in terms of the type of Haki that Gabon just showcased, because Rayleigh was also the first character to showcase Haki in combat. You could argue that the priest showed observation Haki, but Rayleigh was the first character to show Haki in terms of confirmed Haki in terms of countering a Logia, right? There is something very similar here in that there has been a type of Haki that we've been shown multiple times throughout the New World that Oda hasn't really explained to us, and Gabon was just the first person to use it in combat to counter a specific ability, regeneration. So I'm just going to get into that in next Tuesday's video. Zoldan, thanks for bringing a Pirate King to your member for 20 months, man. You mentioned following One Piece since 3rd grade. Me too. I think it's bad now, but I remember being disappointed with Sanji's sub voice because I unironically liked his 4Kids voice at the time, lol. So you probably just listened to the Pirate King podcast, in that I do go into a section about my longtime love for One Piece, when I got into it, how I got into it, all of that. So yeah, definitely check if you want to check out the Pirate King podcast. Definitely check it out. I go into a lot of different questions that people ask me, and this one also includes a lot about life things in general. Sanji's sub voice, because I unironically liked his 4Kids voice at the time, lol. Shoot, I don't remember. I don't feel like I had a clear attachment to the 4Kids voices back then, because when I started watching One Piece again, I pretty seamlessly switched over to the sub stuff, just because I found that easier to find on YouTube. And so I was just like, okay, this is what I'm listening to. But in 3rd grade, I must have really liked all of the dubbed voices. Bassam El Madawi, thanks for the 5. I know it sounds corny, but I think that Scopper used the power of love. When Garp said nothing can defend against the power of love, it was serious. So funnily enough, actually in this week's happy hour that I did with people who got the premium poster bundles, that was a thing that one of the, Vix brought up actually. And he's been on the streams before, that it could have been the power of love or something, because we're kind of discussing the upcoming spoilers. So, that's an interesting possibility. I don't personally think that's what it is here, because I feel like it's an ability that pretty much everyone will be able to use. I can't really imagine Zoro using, for example, the power of love, So I don't know if that's what it is, but if that turns out to be the case, that'd be cool. Like, I'm curious to see how Oda could incorporate that. And speaking of which, I know a lot of you are eyeing the posters in the background. The big news, in case you guys haven't heard it, is, let me screen share for you guys real quick. The big news, in case you guys haven't heard it, all the posters from all time are available. So this is our final batch. We are concluding it here. We're concluding the whole World of One Piece collection, and we're bringing everything back this month. So right now, right here, you got Windmill Village. You got Logtown, Island of Beginning and End. You got Arlong Park, and you got Baratier. I feel like this batch of posters is genuinely the most beautiful that we've had so far. Baratier is my personal favorite out of this batch. It looks fucking beautiful. So we took it all the way back to East Blue to close everything out, with Windmill Village being fittingly the first island here. And yeah, this is it's the entire world of One Piece. The entire world of One Piece we've got available here. Actually, we should probably reorder it on the site, I think, to go chronologically. I think people would really like that. So yeah, we got everything. Everything is available. You guys can get every poster that you want this month. And you can still do the mix and match. So basically, if you want a poster from this batch, you want posters from previous batches, you can buy from literally any batch, and you can mix and match to get a bundle of 4 and get 50% off all 4 posters. So this is the big one. So definitely go check out the posters. They're all available. Here, let me pin it for you guys. So you guys have it and you guys can see it. Yeah, this is the big one. Everything is here. Let me just quickly make a note for myself. Yeah, this is the big one. All right, continuing on. Sheriff Laffy, thanks for being a Yonko tier member for 31 months, man. This ends the myth of the Holy Knights equals Admirals, definitively, right? I never said Holy Knights are equal to Admirals. I was shocked that everybody was putting Gunko. If you go back and look at the past streams, I was surprised that people are already putting Gunko and Sommers, etc., like above first mates. I don't know if that's the case. Also, kudos to Oda for finally developing Nami and Robin's dynamic since Egghead. I feel like the thing that tricked everybody is Jinbei, because people were like, oh my god, if Gunko can so easily take care of Jinbei, then that means that she's like above fucking all the first mates or something. And it's like, no, because all the first mates would do that shit to Jinbei too. Jinbei, Brook, like, I feel like if you put pretty much every Yonko first mate in the same situation, they would handle all 4 of them just as easily, in my opinion. Anyway, I think it's just because people overrate the shit out of Jinbei, so they're just shocked because, you know what? Because, like, what's funny is I feel like if you took Jinbei out of the equation and you just had Gunko fuck up Brook, Nami, and Usopp, then I don't think people would make as big of a deal out of it. But because Jinbei was there also, and people in their minds are like, well, Jinbei's basically, like, right up there with Zoro and Sanji, people are like, well, if she fucked up Jinbei, then that means that, like, she must be, like, crazy strong, when it's like, no, if she fucked up Jinbei, it's not that much of a bigger deal than fucking up, like, Robin or Brook or some shit. It doesn't really matter that much. Where are we at? Kudos to Oda for finally developing Robin and Nami's dynamic since Egghead. I don't know if Oda, like, I think Oda's always done, like, he's just made Robin and Nami, I don't think this is necessarily developing the dynamic that much. He's just always made Robin and Nami, like, pretty tight, and I think that's been a thing since, like, since pre-time skip, obviously. Like, they've always kind of done things as a duo, like, they went shopping together in Saboti, they fucking are sleeping together in the same bed as of Fishman Island, which is funny because I think that was like a post-time skip development or something, which means that they actively chose to get rid of the previous twin beds and then shack up in the same queen-size bed. Like, that was an active decision that they decided to do. Like, they've been close for some time. Like, Egghead, you have them, you know, looking out for each other. Wano, they're fucking taking on the Oniwa Banshu and everything together. I don't know. I think that Oda's always really played them up. Um, Son, thanks for the two. Gaban just aura farming Luffy, Zoro, and now Somers, lol. Yeah, this is what I wanted to say, which is like, I feel like this is actually okay. So I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I saw this a lot too, which is like there was a as this chapter came out, even as like spoiler images started coming out and stuff. There was so much. I think this is a chapter that kind of exposed to me just how bad the Zoro and Sanji agenda hate has gotten. Like it seems genuinely hateful at a point, and it's like it really is blinding. Because like I get it if you want to like every time Zoro gets something or Sanji gets something, people want to pit this feat or that feat against each other, no matter how little or small, right? Little or big, whatever you want to say. Um, but this is where it gets like this is where I feel like the Zoro Sanji agenda is just too hateful because it's like Scopper Gaban's his own character. Like this is his own unique character, right? This is his own dude. This is a new character that we've been introduced to that by all rights, right off the bat, really cool, likable personality, really cool mythos about him, cool fighting style, cool opening scene basically trolling Luffy and Zoro at the same time, right? And then he comes out of the woodwork, like, cool fucking backstory. Like, he fucking fucked the strongest giant woman in Elbaf and had a kid with her and shacked up with her on the island of giants for so long. And now fucking, like, he shows up out of the blue and is the first one to fuck up a God's Night and basically show the answer to this regeneration issue that all the characters have been facing for the last few arcs. Like, this is a cool character. This is a really, really cool character. And online, I'm just seeing so much diminishment and, like, hate towards this character who is his own person. Because I think people just view him as an extent, like, I think a certain faction just views him as an extension of Sanji and not his own character. So every little thing that he does, they're already pre-primed to just hate on it. And like this was a great moment. This was a dramatic moment. This was an exciting moment. This was like, it's not quite like Rayleigh showing up to stop Kizaru or something, but it is a new version of it. It's an exciting moment. It's a fun moment in the story. It's a cool surprise for readers, and it's a cool debut for this character in like serious battle. And you could just sit back and be like, damn, Gaban just showed up like that and chopped off a fucking God's Knight's arm and has him shitting his pants and questioning why he's not regenerating. That's fucking hype as fuck after the last several chapters of the God's Knights just running over everybody. But instead you have like people arguing over like about like, he doesn't have Conqueror's Haki though, or like, oh, does this lightning count as Conqueror's Haki, or like, oh, the sparks are so little, or like Gaban this, Gaban, like, it's weird. It's like all they see is like a threat for no real reason. It's like Zoro can be however strong he is. Like, this is just, it's his own original character. This is like a totally different fucking character that like people are just obsessively already ready to nitpick at and hate on when it's like, if Gaban, like, let's just be very clear. If Gaban was not established as the left hand of the Pirate King, if he was just introduced as some legendary pirate from the old era, then everyone would unanimously fucking love this character. Like, unanimously, this would be a loved character, and people would be like, holy shit, that's cool, right? In fact, I would bet that a lot of Zoro fans would even be looking at what just happened in this chapter and be like, oh shit, I wonder if Gaban's gonna train Zoro this arc or something and show Zoro how to do that because that was a cutting technique. But because Gaban has this specific role of having been the left hand of the Pirate King, he's automatically pre-hated on by a large portion of the fan base, which fucking sucks because this guy's not Sanji, right? This guy's not Sanji. He's his own character. It's a different fucking character. That's what's really, like, I was shocked to see that because I thought the scene was cool, but then seeing how much hate the character is getting for fucking nothing, just doing a cool moment, and so many people who are ready to jump in and be like, no, the moment's not that cool. It's just bizarre. It's just like, at this point, like, normally I think the Zoro Sanji toxicity and debates are kind of fun to some degree, but this is a point where it's just like, this isn't even fucking Zoro Sanji. This is a different fucking character, but like, you want to tear it down so bad because it's tangentially related, like, in some level of parallel to Sanji in a way. It's weird, and it's like, this sort of thinking is just going to ruin a lot of people's enjoyment of the story. I don't know. I don't know. Luffy K saying just say Zoro fans lol. I mean it is. I mean it is, and I do think that Sanji fans can be really bad, but I don't think they're as bad as Zoro fans because I don't recall there being like this sort of hate train for Rayleigh ever, right? I really don't think there's a sort of like giant hate train against Rayleigh, or anytime Rayleigh does something cool, there's a faction of. If there is, it's maybe very minute, but it's not something I've noticed. Like, I really don't think that Sanji fans are just blindly out there hating on Rayleigh. I don't think I remember, like, when Rayleigh showed up at Amazon Lily to scare off Blackbeard, I don't remember seeing, like, Sanji fans coming out in swarms calling Rayleigh, like, a pussy or something like that, or talking about how, like, Rayleigh can't fight, like, Rayleigh was scared to fight Blackbeard and he was lucky about reputation or something. Like I don't remember that being a thing. But with Gaban, who's like a legitimately fucking cool new character, why are Zoro fans so itching to just shit on him? It's really weird. It's really, really weird. Like, I think this is legitimately probably the worst I've seen the Zoro Sanji agenda train become, because it's not even fucking Sanji. It's a different fucking character that's a cool fucking character. He's a cool character. It's just like, but the moment any sort of Sanji parallel is drawn, it's just like, no, we can never acknowledge him as a cool character. We can only shit on him in all of his moments. And we can never just appreciate a cool scene for being a cool scene. It's really weird. I don't know. Like, am I wrong? Do Sanji fans shit on Rayleigh? I don't know if there's, I think Rayleigh is one of the least hated on characters in the story. Continuing on. Nundu V, thanks for the 2. Elbaf on pace to potentially be the best New World arc. I think in terms of, like, actually just slow-paced, character-focused, like, main character-focused story writing, I definitely think that this is the most on pace to be similar to pre-time skip arcs, in my opinion. Potentially the best New World arc. We'll see. Continuing on. Dick so small I piss on my balls. Thanks for the 5. We found out that Elbaf uses transponder pill bugs instead of snails. So Loki talking to Mosa on a snail is a strong hint the latter is a foreigner. That's a really good point. That's a really, really good point. I didn't think about that. Who would have fucking left that snail there? That's a really good point. And some event happened to them recently that freaked them the fuck out. Let's get the stream likes up to 100 real quick. Dandelion, welcome to the Supernova. Thanks for joining. Dick so small I piss on my balls. Thanks for the 5. I think you're super cool and want to be your subordinate is a lie. Caribou has attempted twice now. AWs fit the sun god of ancient weapons fit the sun god of destruction. Caribou is Mosa. Oh, you think Caribou wants... Oh. That would be really interesting. You think Caribou wants to get it to Loki? That'd be really cool. I just can't imagine Loki picking up ancient weapons of destruction. He's just a dude. Like, he's an individual dude. Like, is Loki gonna go pick up Pluton by himself? That'd be a really, really cool twist. Interesting. We're getting multiple comments about... Oh, you had the previous comment too. I forgot. Hey, Harley, Casey. Sorry, I might have to reel the dogs in a second. Stormfox, thanks for the 2. Zoro fans make me hate Zoro, and I don't want that. Before I was part of, like, the One Piece community, I think that I didn't realize how toxic Zoro fans could be. Because, you know what? I think from what I recall, I think on Reddit, it's less toxic. I used to comment more on Reddit. Like, first, I would just be a One Piece fan in a bubble, and I'd occasionally read, like, YouTube comments, or, like, Harley, Casey, hey, hold on. 1 second. Hey, Harley, Casey. Harley, hey, Harley, stop. Hey, Harley. No. Inside. Harley, inside. Yeah, before when I was a One Piece fan in a bit more of a bubble, um, I think I never would have imagined that like it was that bad in terms of Zoro Sanji hate. When I was on Reddit, I think I would argue more in favor of Zoro, but because I felt like it was more even keel there. But I think ever since being on Twitter, and I think the maybe being more engaged in One Piece YouTube community, that's when I've really noticed how much hate there is between the two factions, because it's pretty damn bad. It's pretty bad. And I think Zoro fans are a lot worse. However, it's hard to say whether Zoro fans are legitimately worse, because I think a flip side of this is that Zoro fans tend to get more ammo a lot more frequently. Like, Zoro's generally going to get shit that makes him look good or hypes him up pretty much every single arc, whereas Sanji fans are kind of like waiting and seeing, like, are we gonna get something? Is he gonna get Kakurazaki? Is he gonna get a fight? Is he gonna get, like, you never know. Like, Sanji fan is like being a Zoro fan, I feel like is like it must it's like close to a guaranteed that you're always going to be getting a steady diet of things that hype you up or hype up characters that you're parallel to, or new abilities, things like that, and fights. Sanji, it's like a wait and see, right? So I don't know if it was flipped the other way around. Maybe like Zoro fans generally have more to talk shit about, but I definitely think it goes way too far, where it's like comes to a place like you're literally insecure that this other character could ever possibly be portrayed as comparable to your character, right? If the roles were flipped and Sanji fans got like a lot more shit regularly to beat their chest about, maybe they'd be as bad as Zoro fans. So I don't know. King G says Sanji fans harass Toei. Why is this a conversation? Did they harass Toei? Or are they just upset that Sanji's literally not in certain scenes that he's supposed to be in? I don't know if that's like harassing. I mean, harassment is a wide. I don't know. The definition could be pretty wide, huh? GDN, thanks for the 5. Dare I say it, Gaban has looked better in his intro than Rayleigh so far. Zoro fans keep the underground copium market alive. I don't think Gaban's looked better in his. I think it's tricky because I would almost say that like because the God's Knights are hard for us to scale just yet. All we know is that they're solidly above Jinbei. I would say Gaban's more like I think Gaban, the impact and effect that he had on Luffy and Zoro in that debut, that was almost cooler than this. What he did against Sommers here was really cool for like a sort of aha, you can actually do this to the God's Knights, and like Gaban's somebody that really knows his shit. The way he trolled Luffy and Zoro, I think that was almost like because I think if you asked a lot of people how would Kizaru do against like Luffy, or not Kizaru, how would Rayleigh do against Luffy or Zoro today? I think they might imagine a similar scenario, like a similar showing as what Gaban showed them, right? So I don't know if one's more like, the difference is that Rayleigh had to fight in a life or death situation against a stronger opponent than Gaban, right? Because Gaban against Sommers is not the same thing as Rayleigh versus Kizaru. However, if you go back a little bit, then we did get to see that Gaban is probably not stronger than Luffy right now, but he's at least clearly got the experience, and he can at least like make life difficult for Luffy in a way that's that I think a lot of people would have been surprised, because I think a lot of people wouldn't even have thought that Gaban would be an issue for Luffy at all at this age, right? Obviously, Luffy and Zoro would have beaten Gaban, I imagine, if they actually went all out, but that's why Gaban didn't keep the fight going, right? But just the fact that he was able to have that sort of effect on them, I view that as more impressive than what he just did against Sommers, personally. Damian Wright, thanks for being a Yonko tier member for 20 months. Whether Gaban used Conquerors or not, the ability to hurt a God's Knight is Conquerors or not. I really wish we just had clear Haki indicators. I mean, I think that this is something that will get established next chapter. So I don't view this as like a huge... I do think that those are two separate issues. We should have much clearer indicators of when Conquerors Haki is being used. Guaranteed that is 100% true. Like advanced Conquerors Haki, that should be definitely true. That can be true, and at the same time, I don't think there's any issue here, because I think the point is that whatever Gaban just did is something that needs to be explained to us next chapter or in the following chapters. So I think this is a case of like, oh, Gaban just did something surprising. It's supposed to be surprising right now. We're not supposed to understand what he just did. The revelation will come a little bit later. I think that's... I don't think this is a case where Oda's supposed to be clear in a way that he's not being clear, I think. Gerence Rambo, thanks for the 5. In your video of One Piece's greatest villains, you compare Kaido to Crocodile and Doflamingo. Why didn't you talk about Gecko Moria and Lucci? People forget about Gecko. I think because I think that video is coming right off the back of Wano. So you're keeping it topical, right? So you're talking about the most recent villain, Kaido. And a big topic of discussion around that point in time was, what do we all think of Kaido as a villain? Like, Kaido as a villain was, I think sentiment towards him post-Wano was somewhat negative. I think since Wano has continued, like, since we've gotten some space, I think there's been a lot more positive shift in perception of Kaido. But that was a point of discussion post-Wano. Like, what does everybody think of Kaido as a villain, right? So I went with Kaido, and I compared him to the two other One Piece villains who are most frequently talked about in terms of best One Piece villain discussions, right? Doflamingo. I think a lot of people still consider Doflamingo the best One Piece villain. And I'm talking about arc villains only, so not like Blackbeard, whose time to shine is upcoming, right? Villains who've already been there, done that, gotten their full story, right? Or gotten their main contribution to the story of One Piece, okay? So I talked about Doflamingo, and I talked about Crocodile. I think those are two generally talked about other greatest villains in One Piece. I would agree that putting Lucci in that conversation would have made sense as well. I just wanted to limit the video's focus to a degree, so I kind of went with like the three that are like Kaido, and then who are the two that are most talked about, right? I also think that the simple fact is that because that video is fairly comprehensive and breaks down a lot about Kaido, Doflamingo, and Lucci, Kaido, Doflamingo, and Crocodile, sorry. I feel like with that video, if I got into Lucci, the simple reality is that Lucci is fundamentally a lot more shallow than those three villains, because Oda did not put a lot of time into fleshing out Lucci's character in the Water 7 Enies Lobby storyline as he did with those other villains, because a large part of the point was that the Strats aren't fighting Lucci. Like in Dressrosa, the arc was about defeating Doflamingo. In Alabasta, the arc was about defeating Crocodile. In Wano, the arc was about defeating Kaido, right? Water 7 Enies Lobby was really not about defeating Lucci. Lucci happened to be the last obstacle that Luffy needed to take down, but really it was about rebelling against the world government as a whole. CP9 were the world government's agents. Lucci happened to be the strongest CP9 agent, but this whole thing, it wasn't his plan, wasn't his idea. He was pretty explicitly characterized as like basically a cold-blooded weapon. That is what he was characterized as, and Oda didn't try to do that much more to make Lucci a complex character in that arc, because his role was to serve a purpose, right? Doflamingo was made into a more complex character. Kaido was fleshed out more as a character. Crocodile was much more active in his role as an antagonist in Alabasta, and Alabasta kind of began and ended with Crocodile as the centerpiece. Lucci is not the same way. So I just didn't, like, I could have expanded the scope of that video and included Lucci, but just for time constraints and like trying to keep the video tight, I just kept it with Kaido and the two other biggest villains that people generally talk about, Doflamingo and Crocodile, right? And then Gecko Moria, I think, like, while an interesting villain, I think very few people consider Gecko Moria to be like right up there with Doflamingo and Crocodile as one of One Piece's greatest villains either. Dick so small, I piss on my balls. Thanks for the 5. Mo says recent trauma equals egghead. Also, interesting. Also, I wonder if Gaban encountered Sommers at the same event that hurt Roger and preceded the Mountain Eater event. I feel like I'm going along with what other people are saying, and I feel like it is very likely that Gaban and Sommers met up at God Valley, especially considering the God's Knights are supposedly immortal. I still don't get why the fuck I wonder if the God's Knight's immortality is newer, like a commenter suggested, because Garling aged, and Saturn doesn't age. That was established. But Garling aged a lot from God Value to now. So maybe the God's Knight's immortality is newer. I'm not sure. If Gabon encountered Somers at the same event that hurt Roger. The hell? Heard something at the door. Hold on. I think it's fine. That you might be right. Mosa's recent trauma equals egghead. That raises some questions. Let me take a look at the Mosa situation. I'm really curious about that. That probably what, chapter 11, 30 something, 34 or some shit. Where is the Mosa situation? Fuck. I passed it. 1133. The Mosa situation is very, very interesting because it could get to explaining like some traitor on certain sides or something like that. I don't know. Fuck. I can't find the fucking if someone can tell me where the Mosa chapter is, that'd be great. L, thanks for the 5, man. You think maybe the strongest God's Knights could be Admiral level, and you skipped my super? Was it inappropriate? Oh shit. L, sorry. Oh no, I found it. I'm sorry, man. Sorry I missed it. You said Zoro tards act like they get a steady diet of Zoro meat. Sanji stocks are up thanks to Scopper. I didn't skip it because it's inappropriate, but I can see why you thought that. I have no real comment to say about that. We'll move on from that. I think you stated your piece. Also, let's get the street likes up to 100 real quick. You think maybe the strongest God's Knights could be Admiral level, and you skipped my super, was it inappropriate? Okay, yeah, I imagine the strongest God's Knights are Admiral level or higher. Like, I feel like Shamrock is going to be a Yonko level character. I feel like Shamrock will scale roughly to Shanks, personally. Maybe that's too much, but I feel like that could be the case. I think that's likely for a couple reasons. Like, one, just because we're hitting endgame, and so the characters that Oda is introducing at this point are likely going to be top-tier-esque characters because we're heading to a point in the story where you need a lot of top-tier type matchups, right? Because we got so many characters to go around that are going to need fights, like Shanks, Dragon, Luffy, End of Story Zoro, End of Story Sanji, stuff like that. Like, maybe Kid, maybe Law, depending on how strong they get, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is just like with the God's Knights that we're seeing so far, I feel like it's weird to do victory laps to say like, aha, the God's Knights aren't Admiral level, because it's like, I don't think anybody ever thought that all the God's Knights were Admiral level initially. I think initially the expectations for the God's Knights were that the God's Knights as a whole are likely going to be comparable to a Yonko crew. So maybe the leader might be Yonko level-ish, and then you might have 3 like first, second, third made level characters, and then like a bunch of Tobiropo level characters. But then instead, out of the 3 God's Knights that we have, they've all shown themselves to be at least Yonko commander level, right? If not Yonko first mate or something like that, right? So that's the crazy thing about the God's Knights, which is like Admiral level was kind of insane, even as an expectation. I don't think I think it's because expectations skyrocketed after what happened with Gunko, like Gunko fucking up those 4 Straw Hats. So expectations suddenly skyrocketed, and people were like people went from basically, okay, the God's Knights as a whole are probably like Yonko crew level, like the level of some Yonko officers, to suddenly like, oh my god, they beat fucking Jinbei, the god of the sea, fucking impossible feat. Maybe the God's Knights are all like Admiral level. Like that became the sudden extreme end. Like people just ricocheted all the way to the extreme end of the spectrum, which made no sense because I didn't think Gunko was Admiral level or Somers was necessarily Admiral level or anything like that. And now it seems like we're kind of dialing it back to like, oh my god, the God's Knights are so weak. It's like, no, they're not so weak. They are stronger than we initially thought. They're not quite as strong as like everybody jumped to assuming with the knee-jerk reaction. They are somewhere a little bit below that, most likely. So I think the average God's Knight being above the average Yonko officer makes sense. I wouldn't be surprised if they all scale to about Yonko officer level. not Yonko officer, Yonko commander level, with some being Yonko first mate level, some being, maybe we've got like, I think the leader Shamrock is probably going to be Yonko level himself. I feel like maybe the second or third strongest might be Admiral level or something like that, if you believe in divisions between Yonko and Admiral level or whatever. And then I imagine the rest are not quite there. Maybe there's some surprises in store, but that's what I'm thinking right now. Also, let's get the stream likes up to 100 real quick. Scopper is stronger than the Admirals? I don't think so. I feel like Scopper, I'm just gonna assume that Scopper scales to about Rayleigh, about old Rayleigh. I think there is some things that suggest that maybe no, I'm just gonna assume that he scales to about old Rayleigh. I think Rayleigh made some comment about how he hadn't used his sword in a long time. Whereas it seems like it's possible Scopper has been a little bit more active than Rayleigh as of late. That might be an assumption, but it just didn't seem like when Scopper's pulling out his axes or whatever that this is like something he hasn't done in decades or something. I believe Rayleigh made some comment, might be mistaken, about him legitimately not having fought in some time. So, I feel like I wouldn't, if we assume that Prime Rayleigh was probably a bit stronger than Prime Gabon, I don't think that's a crazy take, but they could still be relative to one another. But then also account for maybe Rayleigh might be a little bit rustier in combat than Gabon. I feel like Gabon scaling to about Rayleigh right now makes sense. Like old Rayleigh, old Gabon being roughly comparable. Okay? And I feel like old Rayleigh, from what we saw, was just under, like, I think it was implied that he couldn't beat an admiral like Kizaru straight up, but he can definitely be a challenge, like a clear challenge, and hold him off for some time. But Rayleigh was Rayleigh was slowly getting tired. He was having stamina issues, stuff like that. That's what we also saw. I imagine Gabon would do a similar showing. So I feel like Gabon is probably closer to an admiral than he is to Sommers. That's my feeling right now. Rayleigh wasn't struggling. That panel is misinterpreted. I mean, I think that the way I read it is basically like they're at a stalemate, but Rayleigh was panting while Kizaru wasn't. To me, I'm just kind of taking that as basically they're doing about even, but if this keeps going, they're doing even, but if this keeps going long enough, one guy seems to be getting tired because this guy's fucking 80 years old and has not fought in some time, and the other guy probably won't get tired as soon. So ultimately, I don't think Rayleigh would beat Kizaru straight up at this age, but that's not to say he's like here and Kizaru's like here. It's just that, like, if that fight went to completion, I imagine Rayleigh would ultimately have to tap out due to fatigue earlier than Kizaru, again because Rayleigh's just fucking old, and he said he hadn't fought in some time, right? So he's out of practice. Kizaru's like a fucking in his prime Navy admiral. That's all I'm saying. Like, it seemed even. One dude's panting and so beginning to get tired. It did not seem like the other dude's beginning to get tired. That's just how I interpret that. Jeremy's Rambo, thanks for the 2. You think Doflamingo deserves to be in top 30 strongest? I don't think at this point. I think at this point, like, the top 30 is so fucking stacked. Even just, like, these 3 Gods Knights that were just introduced, that fucking changes the game, you know? Gripwalk says, more relaxed. There's absolutely nothing to scale from right now. We don't know how strong the Knights or Scopper exactly are. I don't think there's nothing to scale from. We've gotten a good amount of bits and pieces, so, like, we can speculate, right? It's not like these are 2 characters who have just sat on chairs the entire time that they've been introduced. They've been fighting. I feel like from Sommers' reaction, it implies to me that Scopper Gabon is above him, just based on Sommers' reaction, and based on Scopper cutting off his arm and shit. It implies to me that Scopper's above him. Based on how Scopper has been compared to Rayleigh and seeing how Rayleigh did against Kizaru, that implies to me that Scopper would probably do something similar against Kizaru, meaning not necessarily beat him, but hold out well. That's kind of just what it seems to me so far. People are talking about Rayleigh versus Kizaru. So why didn't Kizaru drag it out and beat Rayleigh then? He's the right hand of Roger, a very important person to capture. I mean, look, we can speculate whatever. My understanding was that Kizaru, while he was there, kind of made it clear that he wasn't trying to capture Rayleigh. He was there to do his job and capture the Straw Hats, which is what he had been sent to do. I think that's why he elected to go to Subodhi in the first place, right? So Rayleigh is probably too difficult for him to easily capture. I think that was the gist I got. I don't think he could, like, during his fight with Rayleigh, his expressed goal was to capture the Straw Hats, not really Rayleigh. I don't think Kizaru could have easily captured Rayleigh. It's kind of like it's kind of like if a fucking grizzly bear and another grizzly bear meet in the woods, and one, like, grizzly bear A is just trying to capture some fucking rabbits that grizzly bear B is hiding or whatever. You know, like, if those rabbits get away, I don't think they're necessarily going to try and fight to the death over it, especially considering there was, if you guys might recall, another somewhat significant event around the corner that all Marines were pretty much desperately needed to be present for in order to win. That was, like, way higher stakes than capturing Rayleigh right there. So, do you guys, anyone know this event? Can anyone recall this event? Does anyone have any recollection of this event? I'm curious. Can anyone remember this event that was around the corner that might be a reason why Kizaru just showed up to the island to capture, like, basically fodder, may not want to get into, like, an extreme diff battle for before? Does anyone remember this event? Primo Showtime says, "More, you missed my super." Oh shit, I'm sorry. Primo Showtime, thanks for the 10. I wonder if Robin felt the pain when Sommers killed her clone. I fucking forgot about that. Maybe she dissolved the body as it was happening. It didn't seem like it, which was a reason we thought she couldn't grab the kids. If this is an upgrade to her, then that's pretty OP. Maybe she just disapparated her body as she was getting stabbed. The annual baseball game, the War of 1812. Fuck, what happened in the War of 1812? You hear about that shit once in a while, but no one knows what happened. Moving the Marine base to the New World. Should have called Jinbei the UPS man. If you recall, like, Garp even pre-framed that situation, because Garp was like, do you think the Marines can afford to take on two legends at the same time? Like, regardless of whether you think that Kizaru could beat Rayleigh or not, the story already established that the Marines are focused on concentrating as much of their manpower on Whitebeard, the Whitebeard War that's coming up, right? So that's already established, so it's kind of a moot point, like, could Kizaru have beaten Rayleigh or not? I lean towards no, but regardless, it's not really a good defense to say that, well, then why didn't Kizaru try to defeat Rayleigh no matter what, when it was already established beforehand that the Marines' top priority right now is not trying to capture Rayleigh. It is everybody marshaling for Whitebeard, right? That's written into the story. Oda has Garp explicitly state that. It is what it is, right? If you still believe that Rayleigh could have beaten Kizaru, that's, you know, maybe there's arguments for that or whatever, but the argument that, like, well, then why didn't Kizaru keep trying to go extreme diff and, like, do everything he could to capture Rayleigh, that's not a real argument because we were already told why he wouldn't do that. Something similar happened to her clone in Wano. Yeah, with the Oniwa Banshu, but with that, it felt like less lethal. With this, it felt like, oh, the thorns are actually going through her. I don't know. I'm just going to assume that she was dissolving beforehand. Or Oda just wanted to do a cool moment and didn't really consider that as much. Yeah, I think no matter what, Rayleigh would give Kizaru a serious fight. I think it just depends on... I think a lot of this just comes down to how strong... We just need more instances of seeing like how strong the admirals are, etc. Brandon Lank, thanks for the 5. The next power up to beat God's Knight's immortality will be connected to love. Sommer's dialogue with Gunko, Gaban, Sanji blocking Kizaru, Garb's Fist of Love. I've seen a lot of that. I just don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case because, like maybe that's the case. That'd be a cool twist. Maybe add some new fucking power system or whatever. To me, it seemed more like it's Haki based, whatever he did. But the thing is that I'm just like, how are certain characters even going to fight? Like, does Zoro fight with the power of love? I don't really know if that's a thing. Yeah, do people think Gaban is a Conqueror's Haki user? I don't know yet. Because to me, the Haki that he used, I think what he did here is something that Oda's been very, very, very clearly and blatantly showing us multiple times through the New World so far. Gaban was just the first to display this in combat, but this is not something that's brand new. Okay? So what Gaban did here, to me, I think it is actually a fairly blatantly clear use of Haki. I'm sure, maybe it's something love-related or something. That's just not what I think has been hinted at to us through the story so far. I think it's Haki-related, and I think it's a specific type of Haki, or specific Haki technique that we've already seen a couple times from certain characters, not the Straw Hats. So that's what I break down in Tuesday's video. But it doesn't necessarily need to be Conqueror's Haki or not. So I think that's still up in the air. Muhammad Ali says, tell us, what did Gaban do? I will tell you. I will tell you. Just give me till Tuesday. Did he infuse Haki? I'm just not gonna get into any detail. Power of love as an actual power would be so trash, says Jacob. You never know in One Piece. You never know. I just don't think that's what it was, but, you know. All right, now everyone's speculating on that. That's the one part of the chapter I don't want to talk about as much because it's just like I have to do a whole video. Enronami says, wait for Tuesday's video is more just catchphrase. But, those of you who recall, remember last Monday's stream when I was like, all right, everybody, wait for next Tuesday, or wait for tomorrow's, like, it was literally asked, do you think Kaido and Big Mom could return? And my explicit answer was like, just wait for tomorrow's video. And the next day's video was literally, will Kaido and Big Mom return? Like, I'm not joking when I say that stuff. Like, that was literally what I had planned. That's the video usually, if I go so far as to say, wait for next week's video, it means that next week's video or the following video does very, very directly answer the question in much greater detail and with a lot more panels and evidence and shit. Yeah, Kangiv, it's so funny. Haki is the most important power system, and we have no explicit understanding. Yeah. Dimian Wright says Kizaru didn't use his clones. I just don't even want to get into all that because it's just like, I don't think we've seen much of like we don't even know what Rayleigh's like sword techniques are or anything like that, right? Assuming that he has some named moves. I don't think Rayleigh's used any named moves against Kizaru. And like not using clones, I feel like there's a difference between just because a character didn't use every single technique that we see them have. That's not the same as like holding back. Kizaru didn't use clones at Marineford either. Does that mean he wasn't trying at Marineford? You could say he wasn't, like, there's a difference between saying a character is not going all out. Like, I don't think Kizaru went all out against Rayleigh. I could see Kizaru not necessarily going all out at Marineford either, but that's not the same as not trying. I think he was trying against Rayleigh. I also think that, like, you know, if you really want to make the argument, Kizaru used named moves against Rayleigh. Rayleigh didn't use any named moves against Kizaru. Is that something to consider? But maybe Rayleigh has no named moves. I don't know. Although Roger does, Shanks does, most swordsmen all have named moves. I don't know. I still think Kizaru takes Rayleigh at Rayleigh's current age. But I never like the argument that like just because a character didn't use every single technique that they have, that like it just doesn't count, because it's just silly. That's like saying like because Luffy didn't use King Kong Gun against Kaido in Act 1, that means that Luffy didn't actually go all out against Kaido. Like, no, I think Oda tried to show as clearly as possible that like Luffy went as hard as he could against Kaido in Act 1, and he still just lost, right? You don't have to do every single thing you had. Like, oh, well, Luffy didn't use Snake Man. It's like, it's true he didn't use Snake Man, but like, the point that we're getting, like, the author's kind of just trying to get a point across, you know? Like, he's not going to spend like an extra whole chapter to make sure that Luffy uses every single technique we've seen him use so far. Tio Trevisa says name move scaling is really dumb. I mean, that's also partly my point, though, which is just like scaling based off of. I think the idea is you scale off of like what's the kind of intent that the author is trying to get across. Like, was Oda trying to show everything that Kizaru could do right there? Like, did Oda even think out that Kizaru can do clones and light clones and stuff like that at that point in time? No, like there's not. Oda's not trying to do a whole elaborate extended fight between Rayleigh and Kizaru right there, right? So to me, the argument that like, well, he didn't use clones, it's like he didn't, but that's more so that's like an economy of storytelling type thing, right? Like Oda's not gonna. That was clearly not a section of the story that Oda's going to write 3 chapters of like extended Kizaru versus Rayleigh fighting, right? Like you're more so just getting across an idea to the reader, which is okay, these two are basically stalemating, right? It's kind of like when Kaido and Big Mom fought at Onigashima, we don't really see much of what they're doing. We just get glimpses of them fighting against each other, and it's established that, okay, they're basically stalemating each other. The author's just communicating an idea, right? When Luffy fights Kaido in Act 1, yeah, Luffy doesn't use Snake Man, he doesn't use King Kong Gun, but Oda's just Oda's using a chapter to communicate, like, look, Luffy's doing a lot of moves against Kaido, it's not working, Kaido can beat him pretty easily. Like, does that make sense? I just don't like the argument that because technically the character didn't do every single move we've seen them ever do, including moves that Oda doesn't even feel like introducing till much later in the story, that means that we can't count the feats or anything like that. I don't know. So, like, me saying that Rayleigh didn't use a named move, that's just me basically trying to point out that it's kind of silly to say, well, Kizaru didn't use a move that Oda probably hadn't even come up with at that point in time in the story. Brandon Lank, thanks for the 5. The next power-up to beat God's Knight's immortality will be connected to... Oh, no, we covered this. Sorry, my bad. Dick so small, I piss on my balls. Thanks for the 5. Oh, do you think it's the Devil Fruit neutralization canceling out their Abyss powers, which came from Imu's Devil Fruit, like Joy Boy's Haki did? No. Nope. That's an interesting spin on it, though. I don't think it's that. Oof says no character in fiction goes 100% all out from the start in every situation. No story would happen. Yeah, because if the author has to write a character using all of their abilities from the start, every single fight to establish certain basic things, like, okay, character A is clearly stronger than character B, or like character A and character B are roughly equal, then it would just take so much more story space and require so much more writing, right? Like, did Jinbei use his best move against Gunko? Does he need to use his best move against Gunko to establish that Gunko can handle him? Let me see. I forget what move Jinbei used against Gunko. 5,000 brick. What's Jinbei's highest number brick that he can use? How bricked up can he get? Can someone tell? Is 5,000 brick the highest? Maybe he did use his best move. Maybe that's a bad example. Fuck, maybe 5,000 bricks is his best move. Maybe he did use his best move. That's my bad. I do think that Sommers can... Demon Brick Fist is the strongest. Is Demon Brick Fist the strongest? Yeah, I feel like Gabon's gonna bail him out here basically a little bit, but I think the Gods Knights are still gonna get away with something, so I think there'll be some level of consequence to this situation. Red Dragon 88 says Gods Knights are just gimmick enemies. Shamrock is the exception. I think that's the pendulum swinging too far back from like a few chapters ago when everyone was like, oh my god, the Gods Knights are just broken, right? Because even if you take away regeneration, Gunko would still do the exact same thing to those 4 Straw Hats, right? Regeneration is just a bonus. With Gabon, I still feel like he's a very strong character even without regeneration. And fucking killing him low-key can create an army that is stronger than Kaido's entire army that he spent years developing at a drop of a hat. At basically no strain whatsoever to killing him. He can just do it. He can create this giant-ass army. Like, giant-ass army. Like an army that literal giants are like ants compared to, and literally the nation of giants cannot defeat. That's kind of insane, right? I think killing him Loki has the strongest of the Gods Knights, but at range, at a distance. I think it's really fucking hard to get through all of his shit. L, thanks for the 2. Ayo, pause. Jinbei bricked up? I'm just trying to find out. What's his peak bricked up? Gimmick powers? How are those gimmick powers? I mean, I guess killing him is a gimmick power, but Gunko's straight fighting. Like, she's straight boxing with everybody. Her ability's pretty broken, right? Do we say that Kuma has gimmick powers? Like, I think everyone's just like, nah, Kuma's abilities are pretty broken. Killing him monsters greater than the numbers? Killing him's monsters are way, way stronger than the numbers. Like, his monsters could eat the numbers for breakfast. And it was a big deal that Kaido had 10 numbers. Killing him is like fucking dozens and dozens of these gigantic creatures. Psych That's Wrong says, how you think the matchup's going to look like? That's a good question. I still think Usopp versus Killingham will make sense, because I think that Usopp... I think there's times that Oda likes to use Usopp as kind of a pivotal figure, where there's certain characters that have really, really strong abilities, and then it comes down to Usopp basically... like, abilities that affect the whole shape of the conflict of the arc, and then it comes down to Usopp to actually be the one to deal with them. Especially an ability like Killingham's, where like sniping would be very useful to take that character down. So for example, like Perona. Perona was a character that no one could actually fight straight up in the Thriller Bark arc, except Usopp, right? Sugar, people could fight Sugar straight up, but like she was not easy to get to, was a big part of the problem, and so Usopp ultimately sniped her from really far away, right? And that changed obviously the whole trajectory of the arc, right? Same with taking out Perona. I feel like Killingham, because Killingham conjures fears, so thematically it makes sense for Usopp. He also is like the perfect enemy for a sniper type opponent to have to take down, because Killingham's strongest abilities are really far range, like sending out lots of monsters in advance. I think Killingham and Usopp, I think that just makes a lot of sense. Sommers is tricky, because initially I felt like Sommers versus Sanji was a thing, but then I shifted to feeling like Robin versus Sommers is going to be a thing. I think it's going to depend on Strahd's being able to learn the type of Haki that's going to be needed to damage Sommers. I think like Sommers versus Robin, I still believe has a high chance of being her endgame matchup, and Oda kind of just planted the seeds for it here. I wonder if Sanji will also get involved in that, just because of the love thematic connections as well. So maybe it's a 2v1, but at the same time, if that's the case, I don't know if Sanji fans would be satisfied with that fight, like a 2v1 versus Sommers, because I think Sommers now might seem too weak for Sanji fans to be satisfied with Sanji fighting. Somers should still be really strong. I think just seeing him get bitched by Gaban at the beginning of the arc, it's more of a perception thing. It can make him feel like weaker. Like I imagine Somers is stronger than Queen for sure, but Sanji fans might want something more for the character. Um, and then as for Gunko, I think I legitimately still believe Bonnie is going to be significant for Gunko because I still believe in the Bonnie Gunko connection, and I think Brook could be involved in that as well. So I think certain Gods Knight situations might be 2v1s, and then lastly, I think that there will be some new Gods Knights arriving at the end of the story that might be fought. If you take out the immortality, I don't know if Somers is stronger than Queen. Yeah, I think we need to see Somers in action against some characters. Just it's hard to tell right now. It's really hard to tell with Somers because he beat Saul off screen, but Saul we have no sort of scaling for. As far as we know, Saul is a vice admiral and probably one of the stronger vice admirals. But being a vice admiral at this point in time means jack shit. Like in Egghead, vice admirals were basically treated like fodder, right? So being a vice admiral at this point doesn't really mean anything. For all we know, Robin might be stronger than Saul at this point. We don't know. We don't know. We didn't actually get to see what Saul did against Somers, right? We saw Saul can use Haki, but all vice admirals can fucking use Haki. That was established. So with Somers, we need to see a bit more. I imagine that he's still very. Oh, hold on. What the fuck's going on? Why are they barking so much? Give me 1 second. Something's going on. What? What's going on? All right, hold on. Let me see one thing. Let me see one thing. All right. I don't know what they're barking at. I feel like someone keeps coming to the apartment door or something. All right. All right. Shouldn't there be another Supreme Commander now? Yeah, I think what do you call it? Shamrock's gonna be promoted to Supreme Commander. I think that's what we're looking at. At what power do you think Green Bull is compared to Zoro and Sanji? What power do I think Green Bull is compared to Zoro and Sanji? I think Green Bull is stronger than Somers, and I feel like Green Bull is probably. I think Green Bull is stronger than Zoro and Sanji still. I think Admirals might be a little underestimated by people. I think Green Bull is still stronger than Zoro and Sanji, and I feel like Green Bull is probably. It's tricky because like Green Bull. I think a lot comes down to how people feel like about the Green Bull scene with King and Queen. And another thing that people I think underestimate is that Green Bull was holding off pretty much all the scabbards pretty handily. Even Yamato attacked him, and I feel like if Yamato got involved, then that might be enough to turn the tides, but Yamato chose not to fight. But it still didn't seem like Yamato on her own was being implied to be able to beat Green Bull. So Green Bull's just a difficult situation to call. I feel like some people think that because Green Bull took out King and Queen, it wasn't really established what the fuck was going on in Udon. Like, were King and Queen captive in Udon? They had a week to recover. A week's a pretty good amount of time. It's hard to say. There's only 3 opponents right now, but I feel like more opponents could come along in the arc later on. Like CP9 only had a few opponents early on, but we met more CP9 members at Enies Lobby, right? Egghead began with only a few characters, like a CP0 being sent over, and then we had a much more robust faction to fight at the end of the story. Question for everyone: would Mihawk one-shot Zoro right now? I think if Zoro busts out Ashura, I don't think there's any character that can one-shot him. I think Zoro using, like, not using Ashura, I think maybe if Mihawk, like, I don't know. No. Like, one-shotting is tricky because it's like, if a character uses their absolute strongest attack and that, like, cuts off someone's head, is that one-shot? I guess it's one-shotting. Primo Showtime, thanks for the 5. Gunko has to be a part of Brook's old crew or part of the kingdom he used to be at before he was a pirate. Maybe she was a slave there. Has to be part of Brook's old crew or a part of the kingdom he used to be at. You think? No. Or a part of the kingdom he used to be at before he was a pirate. I don't know. That'd be really interesting. Gunko's story is going to be really interesting no matter what. Just because there's clearly a lot more depth to her character. Some people have said that maybe Brooke's seen her at a fucking concert or some shit. Meek, thanks for the 10. A little note about Robin's move called drumsticks. It's Classpedia, a genus of flower. The kanji used is for a species whose name is drumsticks. This is aligned with the kanji of hammer flower. What the fuck? I don't even know what to make of that. Okay, that's good. Thank you for that information. I don't know what to make of that, but that's kind of cool. I like how you know what's funny is that One Piece, every single attack that some of the Strahds have at the very least is named, even if it's like random ass shit. It's just funny. It feels whimsical. 1 second here. Hold on. I don't know if you read One Piece OP scans because their name of Robin's move was totally different from ours. That's why I brought it up. Lol. Okay, should have clarified. Okay, makes sense. I was like, is this just trivia? It is fun trivia. But, you know, like, that's interesting. Morio Anime says it was a pretty cool chapter and I'm not even in power scaling. Yeah, it was just a cool moment. And I think Robin was like, it was a Robin chapter with Gabon getting to sneak in and steal the spotlight and getting the big highlight moment. But Robin did really cool shit this chapter for sure. Definitely really enjoyed Robin here. Hold on. I feel like Elbaf is shaping up to be a great Robin arc, which is obviously something that I think everybody can enjoy because it's just been so long. Her getting shit against Black Maria was cool, but this is like a different ballgame where it's like, damn, like this is shit that I feel is like it could be a whole arc of some focus on her, which is obviously really something that I think everybody could really appreciate for her. GDN, thanks for the 5. How do you think Zoro and Sanji compare to the Snakemen that fought Kizaru? I think that's a better indication for Zoro and Sanji against Admirals. Man, that's... I don't fucking know, because, like... I feel like this might be weird, but I feel like looking at Luffy versus Kaido, I don't know if there was that big of a difference between, like, Luffy and base versus Luffy once he went Gear 4th against Kaido. Because at that point, it was, like, the Haki that really mattered more than anything. So I don't know. I feel like Luffy and Snake Man should still beat Zoro and Sanji as long as Luffy's actually using Advanced Conqueror's Haki and shit. You know, like I feel like that should still be a thing. Um, but I just don't know if that's how Oda would actually write it, if that makes sense. Like I don't know if Oda would like I just sometimes don't know how much stock Oda puts into like, okay, these characters have these power ups or whatever, so like this stacks to this, which stacks to this, which stacks to this. I kind of view Luffy nowadays as just like, is he using Gear Fifth or not using Gear Fifth? I wouldn't be surprised if his usage of individual power ups decreases over time. Um, by that I mean like individual power ups decreases over time. I guess by that I mean like um things that aren't Gear Fifth. Like I feel like I wouldn't be surprised if it's kind of like Gear Second and Third kind of just started to blend together at a certain point where he would just use that in base every now and then. Like he would just throw in a little bit of Gear Second here, a little bit of Gear Third here once he was in post time skip. I wouldn't be surprised if that's basically the same as that's what he's gonna do with Gear Fourth. Because my personal feeling, I've always felt like this might be the case with Gear Fifth. I feel like, because Oda always planned One Piece to be a much shorter story. So I imagine that, I genuinely think Oda may have always wanted to write Luffy fighting like he fights in Gear Fifth. Like that might have been the vision for his hero. But you can't have the hero have that ability from the beginning. That's like just too much, and you can't write an extended story with like fight after fight with that ability. So I feel like Oda kind of nerfed his hero and was like, okay, he's gonna get to fight like this sort of reality warping zany shit, but we'll start with him just having rubber, and then one day he'll be able to awaken into his full mode, which is this other shit, right? I feel like that might have been the simple concept. I think the simple concept from the beginning might have just been like base Luffy and then awaken Luffy. I think that could have been it. And so in base form, he just fights his rubber. And then eventually, when he gets his full powers, he can do everything he can do, like cartoon universe shit. I feel like that might have been the case, okay? Now, as the story extended, I feel like Oda at some point began to realize that he needs to write... Because, like, Luffy didn't have power-ups for an incredibly long amount of time for a shonen protagonist. A crazy long amount of time. Like, it wasn't until almost 400 chapters into One Piece that Luffy used a power-up. Like, literally not till deep into the Water 7 Enies Lobby storyline. So about 400 chapters. Like, you look at other series, shonen protagonists have like 5 power-ups by that point in time, right? Luffy didn't have anything. I really feel like Oda, as the story went on, at some point began to realize, like, it's going to be a long time before my hero gets his main power-up. And so then he started thinking of gears as a way to sort of stack things out for Luffy to actually give him some ways to leap forward without getting to that crazy awakened form. So I almost feel like gears became a sort of Oda method of padding out Luffy's development. I feel like the end game was always going to be that super free form where he can do all sorts of cartoon shit and fight like that. So because, and I might be totally wrong because there's not that much evidence for that. I'm just thinking backwards in terms of like comments that Oda's made about how he's always wanted to draw Luffy, like what his initial concept of One Piece was, how he planned the story at first. I don't think gears were planned, but I do think that that was always planned. And so I think gears came as a sort of sandwich stuff in the middle. And therefore, as we progress towards the end of the story, I feel like it's likely that we'll be seeing less and less of the gear second, third, and fourth stuff because those may ultimately just have been placeholders to get us between like all that's really going to matter is like base Luffy and then awakened Luffy. And we're generally going to see Luffy fighting in his awakened form. KKD Reaper, thanks for the 2. You think Gaban is using an advanced type of observation? I don't think so. I have a different theory of the type of Haki that Gaban's using, and that's coming out in Tuesday's video. I think it's something that we've seen a lot of evidence for already in the story. A lot of instances of this type of Haki, actually. So I feel like there's already a good number of instances that suggest what Gaban is actually using right now. I think he's just the first character to use it in combat, but we've seen other characters use this specific type of Haki in other instances, okay? So that's what I believe. Tuesday's video will break that down in depth. However, to play devil's advocate, I think observation Haki, there might be a chance that this is observation Haki based, because I think something that's been softly emphasized so far is that Gabon is very, very skilled at observation Haki. I was unsure about this at first. People were talking about how Gabon managed to get to he knew to get to the castle before Luffy and Zoro because he sensed something there before they did. And I was like, well, maybe Luffy and Zoro were just further away. But then even now in the story, Gabon's sensing like the God's Knight's presences a lot earlier than Luffy and Zoro. I mean, again, you could argue it's all still a distance thing, but Gabon has been established multiple times being able to hear voices that other Monster Trio members are not picking up on. So he might be really good at observation Haki, and so maybe observation Haki is the key here. That would be kind of cool if there's a level to observation Haki that needs to be figured out here. Maybe there's like a weak point in their regeneration or something like that. Even, and along the lines of observation Haki, even in Gabon's little skirmish with Luffy, one of the things that stood out is like Luffy can't touch Gabon. Gabon's able to evade everything, right? So if observation Haki is the key, I think that would fit a lot with what Gabon's been doing. Yeah, now you got me thinking on that train, because I do think it would be cool. I already feel like Usopp's gonna have to learn observation Haki a bit better in this arc. If this arc is around the theme of learning observation Haki better, that could make a lot of sense. I don't know. That's an interesting alternative idea to what I've been thinking. GDN, thanks for the 2. Snake Man wouldn't need advanced Haki for Sanji, in my opinion. I mean, I think it would at least need Future Sight or something. Sanji's really fucking fast. What my thing with Snake Man is I wish we had more clarity on how Kizaru was dealing with Snake Man's attacks. Because Kizaru was like... Was he blocking them exactly? Was he like just dodging them? I don't know. Cripwalk says, Gabon just proves my point that current Luffy is a scrub by old gen standards. I just think that we've been led to feel like Kaido and Big Mom are kind of a ceiling, but they're really not. I feel like there's a lot stronger characters that have come along before. I've done my end of story, my all-time rankings of One Piece characters, if you guys recall. And I think Kaido and Big Mom are just a lot lower than people think overall. They just had to be hyped up a lot because Oda's always going to hype up characters. How to explain? I've been in the One Piece community a long, long, long time, okay? A long time. Like, even when I wasn't active in One Piece forums and stuff like that, I would be reading a lot of discussions, etc., Naruto forums, stuff like that, okay? Naruto forums is a website, by the way. The thing that I've noticed as the major commonality in Oda's writing is that Oda will always, always, always go way out of his way to really, really hype up as much as possible the current arc characters, the current arc centerpieces. He will build up their strength as much as possible. So what I've noticed, historically speaking, is that arc after arc, the characters that are the centerpieces of that arc, they get a lot of hype that leads readers to believe they're a lot stronger than they actually are in the grand scheme of things. And as the story then progresses, we get more perspective, and we realize that there were always much bigger things lurking, okay? So the first example I can give is like Marineford and Whitebeard. During the Marineford arc, by the end of the Marineford arc, I and pretty much all of the One Piece community, if you go look at any forums, any discussions, any posts, YouTube videos, whatever, from that point in time from Marineford, the absolute consensus was that Whitebeard, clearly the strongest character in One Piece, and they're talking about old Whitebeard, like the Marineford Whitebeard, clearly the strongest character in One Piece, no question, no ifs, ands, or buts. Like, that was something that everyone took as basically like gospel. Oda just showed us throughout this arc. Everyone's calling him the strongest, yada, yada, yada. Okay? Now, the further we've gone on in the story, a lot of readers would argue that Marineford Whitebeard, considering his age, heart attack, sickness, and considering everything new we've seen from all the Yonko since then, the things we've learned about Emu, potential of Dragon, things like that, a lot of people now argue that Marineford Whitebeard was maybe not actually the strongest in the world right then at Marineford. However, you have to understand that during the Marineford arc, Oda's hyping up the character as much as possible because he wants to make that storyline as exciting as possible. So every 2 chapters in Marineford, some character or another is talking about how Whitebeard is the strongest. Whitebeard is the most unstoppable force. And like every chapter is geared towards like hyping up how Whitebeard's doing all this despite his heart attacks, injuries, yada yada. So the overwhelming consensus throughout Marineford was like, holy shit, Whitebeard is the pinnacle of One Piece, and this is just the strongest One Piece characters of today get, okay? It's only as we get more context after Marineford that now it's more of a question. It's like, okay, but was old Whitebeard as strong as like Kaido or Shanks? Was old Whitebeard as strong as like Emu is gonna be? Even Dragon? Once you get more context, you realize that Oda was like playing things up more and hyping Whitebeard up more as the pinnacle, because that's the arc that you're getting readers invested into the drama of that arc. Like, it's less exciting if you're like, Whitebeard is weak right now and he's not as strong as other Yonko, right? Not saying that's actually the case, but now it's more in question whether or not Marineford Whitebeard was that dude still or not, right? Fast forward, Dressrosa. Over the course of the Dressrosa arc, you can go back and look at Reddit posts, power scaling discussions, etc. Doflamingo was getting a ton of hype throughout the Dressrosa arc. And it was just like, holy shit, Luffy can't even, Luffy and Law, they need to team up. He's holding his own against Fujitora. Like, there's a lot of hype going around with Doflamingo at that point in time. There were discussions at that point in time. Doflamingo, is he as strong as Marco? Is he Yonko first mate level? That was a thing that was discussed quite a bit because Oda's putting a lot of time and effort hyping up Doflamingo in that arc. As the story progressed, we got more perspective. We saw other Yonko commanders in other scenarios. And now more people are like, okay, maybe Doflamingo's not first mate level. He's second or third level at best, right? It just took some more time and perspective. Like, we got to see Cracker, Katakuri, and then ever since then, way more first mates, Yonko commanders, etc. Same thing in Whole Cake Island. Whole Cake Island, do you know how many people got to the end of Whole Cake Island feeling that and staunchly arguing? It was a common opinion at that point in time, not the consensus, but very commonly referenced at that point in time, that Katakuri is probably the strongest Yonko first mate. Because in Whole Cake, Oda gassed Katakuri up to the fucking heavens, right? Not just seeing the future and stuff, but stuff like Katakuri's back has never touched the ground. No one's ever been able to touch the ground. Katakuri says that no one's ever been able to dodge his attacks as much as Luffy. So, like, a lot of people were saying that, like, oh shit, like Katakuri, he's fought other Yonko commanders and first mates and stuff, and, like, none of them have been able to push him this hard. Katakuri's probably the strongest first mate. That was a very common opinion. Like, a lot of people, due to the popularity of the character, how much time Oda spent gassing him up in that arc, came away feeling like Katakuri, strongest Yonko first mate. Now, more time, more perspective, more showings from other characters, we start to begin to understand that Katakuri, not only was he not the strongest Yonko first mate, he was very possibly the weakest Yonko first mate. Like, there is an argument for that, at least above Shiryu, sure, like, not counting Shiryu, but there's an argument that, like, he's below Marco, King, Ben Beckman, even Zoro now, right? So, like, that's all I'm saying. Like, Kaido and Big Mom, they're hyped up a lot for the Versus Four Emperors saga. Like, people say Kaido's the popular opinion, a lot of people think Kaido's the world's strongest creature, right? People say, don't bet on this dude against this dude in a 1v1. Oda's gonna hype up his characters a lot for the arcs that they are the centerpieces. I've seen this with Whitebeard, I've seen this with Doflamingo, I've seen this with Katakuri, I've seen this with Kaido, and by extension, Big Mom. Generally, Oda gives us more perspective later on that he was overhyping the character for their time, and in actuality, he's saving more impressive shit for later on. It's just more dramatic. It is more dramatic to be reading Whole Cake Island and thinking, holy shit, Luffy is fighting against the dude who nobody else has ever been able to knock down, who nobody else has been able to dodge this guy's moves this much before. That's exciting. It's exciting thinking Luffy's fighting the, the strongest Yonko first mate, like this invincible man, right? Same thing in Wano. It's exciting thinking Luffy's fighting against the world's strongest creature or something like that. As time goes on, the ceiling is going to continue to raise, because just because Oda wants to over dramatize things for a given storyline, that's not really indicative of how many levels Oda's actually built to the world. Same thing with Marineford. It's exciting to think that we're watching the strongest character in One Piece right now in action. Travis Simmons says, I don't buy King greater than Katakuri. Sure. Like, I'm not saying Katakuri is definitely the weakest Yonko first mate. I'm just saying that, like, we went from basically a lot of people arguing that Katakuri was the strongest first mate in Whole Cake Island to now people basically debating, like, okay, is he the weakest or the second weakest after King, right? Shiryu, I personally don't really count because he's, like, a new school Yonko first mate compared to the original ones, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, continuing on. John's the Nomad. Thanks for the 5. Emit's not and Algaban's attack basically confirms that it's Conqueror's Haki related. Non-users need the knot to stun them so they can damage the Gorser/God's Knights. It's funny you mentioned the Joy Boy knot because I actually do think that plays into this, but not in the way that you think. I think the Joy Boy knot is strongly indicative of what happened here, but not necessarily in the way you think. DuckDuck20, thanks for the 2. And just wait for Tuesday's video where I break it down in depth. Also, let's get the streamlights up to 150 real quick. DuckDuck20, thanks for the 2. I feel like we aren't even past 20% of Elbaf yet. I feel like Elbaf will end around chapter 1200, so where does that put us? We're at like, we would be at around the, I think we're close to maybe the 33% mark. I think we're about 1/3 of the way through. I think like maybe I feel like this initial God's Knights assault will conclude in the next few chapters. Then we'll get like another 25 or so chapters focused around, like more character-based stuff for Elbaf, like a bit of a lull before God's Knights maybe return, and maybe some cutaways to the outside world. And then I think the final third, like around 1175 to 1200, will be action again. Javon Johnson, thanks for the 5. Yo, Morge, how do you think the One Piece community has changed over the years? Do you think the spike in popularity recently has changed things? Shoot, I've definitely observed changes. It's hard to say that. I think things are more agenda-driven and more aggressive nowadays than they were when I first started. But I might be wrong. I think it also might be partly my own participation, because I think earlier on I was less into agendas and arguing certain things. I used to be like very, very like just analysis stuff and like goody videos and stuff like that. And then I think as I began to engage more in some of the debates ongoing in the community, then I feel like I got sucked into it. And now probably the content I see and consume is more related to that. So it's hard to say. I know a lot of people say that One Piece community got worse as it got more popular. I think there was some merit to that, because the thing is that One Piece earlier, so people that used to be One Piece fans were One Piece fans largely because they cared about the story and the characters. Because for the longest time, One Piece did not have several of the key elements that other popular shonen had. It didn't have great fights or like a huge focus on power scaling and super strong characters and like, stuff like that. One Piece story, like think about pre-time skip storylines like fucking Drum Kingdom or like Skypiea, like arcs that have obviously fights and stuff, but it's not really the focus. I mean, it is the focus to a degree, but it's also just like, it's more focused on just telling a good story. Like Enies Lobby was the first time One Piece even had traditional shonen, like fast-paced action fighting, like that seemed similar to like what Naruto and Bleach were doing. So for a long time, like if you were like the One Piece community was composed of people that genuinely, like, we didn't have that much lore. We didn't have like crazy strong hype characters and stuff. I think Marineford changed all of that, because suddenly it was like, oh my god, everything in One Piece is coming together for this crazy fictional war with like super powerful characters and all this power scaling and stuff to dive into. And like hype and aura and all that shit, right? And then I think as post-time skip progressed, especially as we approached Wano and the promise of like another big war and the idea of the Yonko and everything like that, I think that ramped up, so that drew even more people in. So I definitely think that like if you're a fan, if you imagine people who are fans of One Piece for the first like 200 chapters, those are people that genuinely just really like the character writing, the adventure, the narrative arcs, things like that. You're probably not in it for the fights or the promise of like superpower hype characters or like crazy show like DBZ-esque showdowns, right? As the series has progressed and progressed, it got more popular largely because it shifted into more of like a World War-esque storyline with like crazy powers like Haki and Haki abilities and like super powerful DBZ type characters and stuff like that, along with the really good storytelling that it always had. But once you shift more towards that other territory and bring more of those elements in, it's going to bring in more fans that are, I guess, agenda focused. Abyssal Leviathan, thanks for the 5. I watched King of Lightning's Katakuri versus Kizaru video when I'm depressed. I don't think you can even talk about Katakuri versus Kizaru once you see like how Luffy's Snake Man did against Kizaru, because that version of Luffy's way stronger than what fought against Katakuri, and Snake Man didn't really last long at all against Kizaru, so yeah, I don't know. Kangev says, this is super interesting. I started at 1,000 chapters in 2020. No clue what it was like with 200 chapters. Yeah, like it's just a totally different series you're getting into. One Piece got shown and gentrified. That's a really funny way of putting it. YY7 says, bro, there's no way we're reading the same story if you think King is stronger than Katakuri. I think that there's an argument that Katakuri is overall stronger than King, but I do think King would be like a really bad matchup against Katakuri. So I usually try and say that like just because character A can beat character B doesn't mean character A is stronger overall, right? Like sometimes matchups do matter. So if you want to argue that Katakuri would do better in more matchups than King, maybe you have an argument there. It's just, I literally don't know how Katakuri would output enough damage. The problem with Katakuri that we've discovered over I think Katakuri just is going to inherently have a lot of poor matchups, especially against stronger characters, because one of the big things that has developed as the story has gone on is just characters that are very, very difficult to damage. That's become more and more of an issue as the story has gone on. And Katakuri's biggest flaw is easily the fact that he doesn't output that much damage. He just doesn't output that much damage. He fucking beat up on Luffy for like 12 hours straight when Luffy really wasn't able to get that many hits on him for a long time. And he still couldn't put Luffy down, right? Like, and then you hit characters like Kaido who could one-shot Luffy in Act 1, right? And that's the problem. Like, you just keep seeing more characters as we keep going where some level of higher Haki or something like that is needed to actually damage them or deal enough damage to hurt them. And Katakuri doesn't hold up well in that regard. He was uniquely suited to be a major problem for Luffy at that point in time. I think it's just much harder to call him like a big problem for Luffy or for a lot of characters when you just hit a point where like damage output just makes that much of a difference. And the flip side is that Katakuri's biggest strength, which is avoiding it, like Katakuri would basically, there's a lot of opponents Katakuri would need to beat by basically like death by 1,000 cuts. Like just keep evading them for so long and keep hitting them for so long that eventually Katakuri wins. And I think that's just hard against a lot of these stronger characters, especially characters that have like really wide-ranged area of effect attacks, you know? Like King can output like a lot of magma. You know, I think that becomes hard for Katakuri to dodge over an extended period of time. A lot of characters can do large area effect stuff. I don't know. YY7 says King isn't even shown to have any good Haki. Yeah, but the flip side with King is that he has the magma abilities, right? So maybe I'm being too specific when I'm saying like you need strong Haki, right? What I mean more so is that like stronger damage output abilities, right? Katakuri doesn't seem to have that. King doesn't have strong Haki either, but he does have like the crazy magma shit, right? So the crazy magma shit is offensively pretty strong. I'm not saying King can damage like top tiers or whatever himself necessarily, but I'm saying that like we are hitting a point in the story where lots of characters are damage tanks, And so if you're just comparing, like, let's just compare King to Katakuri, the fundamental problem is, like, I don't know if Katakuri can actually output enough damage to ever hurt King. Whereas with King, you could definitely imagine him, like, outputting enough damage with his magma stuff to hurt Katakuri. The argument would be, well, Katakuri could probably just dodge that a lot. Maybe he could. We don't know. Katakuri, you've never had to see him deal with, like, some crazy area of effect stuff, like King just shooting a bunch of magma everywhere, and turning the battlefield to magma, because Luffy didn't have abilities like that, right? Luffy is a straight puncher, so Katakuri didn't have any sort of clear issues with having to dodge him. Everyone forgets King's body can explode when someone hits him. Yeah, that's like another issue. Maybe Katakuri is, maybe he is stronger than King, but I don't know if he could win that particular matchup, because I just don't know how he would damage King straight up. And you can imagine someone damaging Katakuri, right? It's just a fundamental problem that, like, as the stories progress, we're running into more and more characters who, like, are able to deal crazy amounts of, like as we keep going up, right? We're being introduced to characters who have, like, really strong offensive abilities, which Katakuri doesn't have. And then Katakuri's biggest strength at his point in, like, at the point in time in the story that we met him, was like, oh my god, he's so hard to hit. Like, Luffy literally couldn't hit him. Katakuri could predict moves, stuff like that. But it turns out, like, if you're just calling a buck, as we've progressed, it seems like being very difficult to hit is not quite as valuable as just straight up being near invulnerable, right? And that's, like, the bigger thing, which is, like, characters like King, Kaido, Big Mom, Marco, like, a lot of characters are really tanky, like Seraphim and shit like that. They're really, really tanky, arguably even Lucci as you keep going. I'm not saying Katakuri loses to, like, Lucci and stuff. I'm just saying that, like, the way the story has shifted has, like, it's demanding more attack power out of characters, because so it's kind of like a meta thing almost. Like, we're learning more about the meta of the One Piece world. You need high attack power, and you need, because so many characters are so tanky, and invulnerability also really fucking, like, being very durable also really fucking helps. The Marco King situation is comical, because that's just, like, I feel like the Marco King situation is just an example of, like, I think it's driven by Zoro fans wanting to argue that King is stronger than Marco, but it's kind of silly, because, like, you can argue Zoro is stronger than Marco once you got Advanced Conquerors Haki without trying to make the absurd argument that King is above Marco, because Marco has way, way, way better feats than King, including kicking King and Queen's ass simultaneously while very exhausted and having to use a lot of his flames and shit to deal with the Ice Oni situation. Like, literally on screen, Marco is shown to be stronger than King and Queen. Like, it's only together that they're able to wear him down, because Marco had also just flown all the way from Sphinx Island to Onigashima and had just fought Big Mom and Perispero and had been handling the Ice Oni situation and was then taking on King and Queen at the same time and still fucking, like, manhandling them. There's, like, no argument in existence. Like, that's literally, like, Oda showed us, as plain as can be, Marco is stronger than King. Like, it's in the manga. He's stronger than King. It's basically like trying to argue that King's stronger than Zoro at this point in time. It's written in the story Marco's stronger than King. There's no real argument for it. Marco is essentially just spanking both of them at the same time. But I feel like Zoro fans want to believe that not only is Zoro stronger than Marco, which I personally do think he is, but they want to believe that, like, every character Zoro beats is also stronger than Marco, because then that gasses up Zoro even more. And that's kind of ridiculous, because it's just like, Zoro scarred Kaido. He beat King. He's got Advanced Conquerors Haki. He's got all that stuff. He's above Marco. We don't need to be like, oh yeah, and the character who Marco fucking humiliated for several chapters straight is also somehow stronger than Marco. That's kind of ridiculous. All right, everybody. We're going to call it here because now we're getting too in the weeds with like conversations that's like whatever. Why is it important who can beat who? This is Kongev. Yeah, the other thing with Marco, I'll just say really quick, is that like Marco has a really good track record against a lot of opponents. Like this that's why he's a great matchup against a lot of characters. First thing he did is the strongest attack Kizaru's ever shown was the first attack that he did against Whitebeard. Marco blocked that. Marco's blocked a Kainu. Marco's blocked Kaido's attack. Marco's overcome Big Mom's attack and actually made Big Mom run away. Marco's blocked King's attack. Marco's done he's blocked pretty much everything you need him to block outside of, I think, the key that was shown is Garp's punch damage Marco. That's the only thing Marco is shown to not be able to block. And so we can kind of assume that like top tier Haki can do it. But outside of that, Marco's done phenomenally well. Like he's got a shit ton of really, 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 really good showings. Yeah. Dick so small I piss on my balls. Thanks for the 5, man. Marco outright says he's burning the candle at both ends just to stall them. Then we see him burned out as they're barely above inconvenienced. Dude, it was 2v1. Do you how... It's a 2v1. It was two characters at the same time. If we saw fucking Shanks fighting Kaido and Big Mom at the same time, and literally every single chapter he's shown spanking them, and eventually we're shown that Shanks got tired because he can't beat Kaido and Big Mom at the same time, would you be like, that means that Oda's saying that Kaido and Big Mom are individually both stronger than him? Is that what that means? No, it's a 2v1. If anything, Oda showed us chapter after chapter that individually, every single interaction individually, Marco could kick either one of their ass, right? In fact, he literally was holding down both of them at the same time. There was not a single moment of the fight that Oda ever implied that either of them can beat Marco by themselves. At a certain point, he got fucking tired out because he's fighting a 2v1 against two other, a Yonko first mate and a Yonko second mate at the same time, and he doesn't have a fucking Yonko second mate on his side. If you give him Jozu, then they lost, then that's a discussion, but he does not fucking have Jozu. What the fuck? This is like... And keep in mind, this was Marco after flying from Sphinx Island to Onigashima, fighting a Yonko and Perospero at the same time and making them run away, and then having to spread his flames out to like help everybody from the Ice Oni situation. So you've already got Marco coming into the fight, having done a shit ton of shit. His stamina has already been he'd already done so much before even being made to fight King and Queen. And then he has to fight two characters who are essentially close to his level at the same time. And Oda gives us every single interaction of them, him kicking their ass. And he actually even leaves the fight blocking King one last time just for good measure before being like, all right, now I'm tired out. If you think there's a single moment in that fight where Oda's implying that King or Queen is individually stronger than Marco, I don't even know, where you would, it's invisible ink. I don't know where that panel is. You would have, where's it showed? Where's this panel at? Where's the panel at? I would love to find out where the panel is. Yeah, but he just stalled them? He made King bleed. What do you mean he just stalled them? How's he supposed to beat them both at the same time? He did make King bleed. That was literally seen. And it would be not possible. He can't beat them both at the same time. A lot of people would argue that Green Bull can't even beat them both at the same time if they're healthy. What the fuck are you talking about? What? What the fuck? What even is this discussion? Is he supposed to beat both King and Queen at the same time? We were shown that he can manhandle them both at the same time. Like, that was established. I'm sure if Marco was fully healthy and was in a fight to the death against King, he would have just dropped him into the ocean because it was shown that Marco can grab King at any time he wants. But there's not really any moment in the fight that seems to indicate that, like, Marco is below King or Queen. This would be like arguing that, like, Luffy is below Saturn because Luffy didn't deal lasting damage to Saturn. It's like, dude, Oda showed you, like, 50 different times that Luffy's kicking Saturn's ass. You want to argue that, like, okay, well, he can't do it literally forever and he's going to get tired out, and it's going to be, like, in a 2v... Like, fighting, like, 2 Gorosei at the same time, Luffy's eventually going to get fucking tired out. Is that... What the fuck are you talking about? Like, you think that puts Luffy below fucking Saturn or some shit? I don't even know. I don't even know what at this point, it's just being stupid. All right, guys. It just goes to show that sometimes things can be shown outright in the manga, and some people are still going to disagree, but it is what it is. Agenda is deep. Agenda is deeply embedded in some people's souls, and that's just not going to change. But it is what it is. It's part of the fun of being a fan. All right, everybody. We're going to call it here, and I will talk to you all later.